Nothing can be more discouraging in almost any area of endeavour than feeling that we're not improving in what we're trying to do. And this surely particularly applies to drawing. And if you feel that your drawing isn't improving at the rate that you think it should be, and certainly if not at the rate that you would like it to, then maybe one or more of these 10 points are the reason why. Now, this first one is really a mindset. And in many ways, it's the overarching principle that embraces all of the others. But consider for a moment any skill that we've learned, whether it's to drive a car or to play football, whether it's to play the violin. And while for some of these things, some people may have seemed to have had a natural connection, a natural advantage, a natural talent, so to speak, for no one did that mean that they didn't have to do the hard work of learning. That natural ability or talent didn't take the place of all the things involved in learning any skill. For some reason with drawing, there is this idea that it's something that we have a natural talent for or not. And that if we have, particularly if we feel we have, or if when we were a child, we were encouraged to believe we did, we can expect that drawing to a good standard, at least to a standard that makes us happy, is going to be fairly straightforward, that we just have to do it and we'll have great drawings at the end. And it can be discouraging when this doesn't happen. But if I don't appreciate that any skill takes hard work and learning to achieve, then I'm not understanding the foundation on which my drawing journey needs to take place. And my second point is that we're simply not drawing enough. And again, this is where thinking back to how we learn other skills is really helpful. How did I learn to drive? Well, there were probably as many driving lessons as I could persuade people to give me, as close together as I could. How did I learn to play football? Well, there was probably football playing, but also football training, both formally and perhaps just with mates or friends every time we got the chance. How did I learn to play an instrument? Probably through regular lessons, but probably also through daily practice. Because this is how we learn any skill. And if I'm drawing, I need to draw often. I can draw what I can draw in whatever time I have available. More drawing for shorter periods of time closer together is actually a better learning strategy than drawing for longer periods but further apart. It's easier to build on what I've done the closer what I'm doing is to the last thing I've done. This next one, I think, is really common, and that's that when we do start to draw, we start to draw way too quickly. And by that, I mean our pen hits the paper or our pencil hits the paper way too fast. We don't stop and think in the way we need to before we do this. Now, if I'm just doing exercises, the equivalent of scales, I might just be drawing straight lines or circles or curves, and that's okay. But if I'm doing a drawing in some sense, then before, as in my case, the ink hits the paper, I need to have observed carefully what I need to observe. I need to have thought out, what am I trying to draw? I need to do the translation, the creative translation process in my mind from what I see in my reference to how I'm going to represent that on the paper. And then I also have to work out the overall strategy. Where do I start? How do I progress? To give me the greatest chance of success at accomplishing all of the aims I have for this drawing. If I don't observe carefully enough, then I don't know what I'm drawing. If I don't work out how I'm going to do it, then I'm putting lines and marks on the paper without any real purpose or understanding of what I'm trying to do with them. And if I've got no strategy, I may well have drawn half the drawing and then realize that for what I now realize I need to do, it's too late because I've put ink on the paper in a way that's ruled that out. And if I keep doing this, I'm going to keep making the same mistakes, the same sorts of mistakes, and I'm not going to improve. I think this next one is also very important, and that's that if I'm going to draw and develop as an adult my drawing style, if my drawings are going to progress and improve, then I need to disconnect from my childhood thinking about drawing and my childhood experience of drawing. Childhood drawing for most of us has very much a two-dimensional focus rather than a three-dimensional focus. And by that I mean it's based on seeing shapes and drawing or copying shapes rather than seeing three-dimensional form. So these tree trunks behind me, as childhood drawings, we tend to see them as two straight lines, almost like a flat ribbon that defines a tree trunk, instead of seeing the curvedness of the trunks and saying, how can I create that effect with the marks I put on the paper? We need to see in 3 dimensions rather than in 2 dimensions. The problem is a lot of our earliest drawing experience is based on seeing cartoons and copying cartoons, which is a very flat 2-dimensional, often stylized or using symbols in place of the actual objects way of drawing. And it is surprisingly easy and common for this childhood drawing mindset to stay hidden in the corners of our mind and to start to infiltrate the choices we make, particularly when we start to draw quickly, because we haven't had time to do the harder, longer taking adult thinking of observation and translation and how will I create the effects and what marks and what strategy for an overall effect. Instead, we're rushing to copy the shapes that we see, which then rule out a more, if you like, mature way of drawing. And if you're finding these thoughts helpful, then please hit the like button right now. That will help me as well. This next point is simply that we draw too quickly. Now, I've already covered that we start to draw too quickly, but by this point, I'm really focusing on the fact that once we start drawing, we draw too quickly. Both the actual speed that we take to draw, a speed that often goes beyond our ability level to have the control and to relate our strategy and our observation and our translation effectively on our paper, but also that we simply haven't had time to do those things adequately. All the way through my drawing, I need to be doing these things with each section, however large or small. I need to continually be looking back at my reference. And when I draw too fast, I don't do that. And when I'm not drawing from my reference and from the thinking that flows from the observation of my reference, I've actually switched to drawing from my imagination. And I think when I do that, that's when I'm most likely to start to dig back into thoughts and practices and habits about drawing that are left over from my childhood and don't relate to my particular reference and for this particular drawing. I think I know, I think I remember, I think I have in my head more than I really do. And if I keep drawing without adequate reference to my photo, then I'm going to entrench these bad habits with every drawing I do. And there will be a point where I won't be able to see improvement because I'm not doing the things that are the foundation for the improvement. I'm not really understanding and being thoughtful of what I'm trying to do from what I see. This next point, when I draw from a photo, my goal somehow becomes to copy the photo as carefully as I can, often without me really thinking, why is that my goal? I'm not going to do a better job than what the photo already is. In fact, the photo contains vast detail that's impossible for me to draw, that's quite overwhelming for me to draw. And so if I haven't thought out what effect I'm going to create, then I'm going to start to draw the impossible, and I'm never going to do very well at that, am I? And it's only when I go beyond trying to copy the photo that I'm freed up to looking at the effect of what I'm drawing, and therefore I can work out ways of putting that effect, capturing that effect, and bringing it to life on my paper with the marks that it is possible for me to make. But the other important thing is that photos, as well as having detail that I can't draw, they have many weaknesses as well, particularly in that they flatten whatever depth is in our scene. So when we see particularly a photo of a tree, it looks like a very two-dimensional shape because somehow the leaves that are coming towards us on branches, which in life look different and clearer and easier to see than the leaves that are further away, somehow in a photo, all the leaves look almost the same, look the same distance. And it's almost like a leaf pattern covering the whole tree, all at the same distance from us, instead of some coming towards us and some being further back and some being on the other side of the tree. And yet in our drawing, that 3 dimensions is what we want to capture. Again, it's disconnecting from the 2-dimensional, more cartoon mindset we have from our childhood. My photo, in fact, is my starting point. But if I start to draw quickly, if I jump to drawing straight away, as I said earlier, then I don't do not just the careful observation, but I don't do that creative thinking process. And then I start to draw an overly literal copy of my scene, which ends up looking less realistic and therefore not very satisfying. I would suggest that if your drawings disappoint you because you feel like they have a cartoon-like look, it's because you're trying to draw too literally what you see instead of creating the effect. But it's creative thought processes that we need to do that lead us from the reference to the sorts of marks we need to make. This next really common reason I believe we don't improve as fast as we'd like comes from the perhaps best and most understandable of motives, and that's that our enthusiasm and our love for our subject carries us away, and we simply draw things or try to draw things that are too difficult for our level of achievement at that point. When I learnt to drive, I didn't start in peak hour in the middle of the city. If I learned to play football, I don't start by being put into the grand final match. When we learn any skill, we start at simpler levels. We learn to achieve within those simple levels, and on that achievement, on the skills that we gain and consolidate, we push on and draw things that are more complex and more complex and more complex. Because as we master certain levels, they don't then challenge us at the next level. So we have, if you like, more mental capacity to spend on the new things, more focus on the new things. When we learn any musical instrument, we start with very simple tunes. We learn all the things that are to do with learning those small pieces well on that particular instrument, and then we extend ourselves by either using those same elements but in a more complex way, or we add more complex elements to the mix and shuffle them all around with a new piece. And this is, for most of us, most of the time, how we learn to learn well. If all the time I'm rushing ahead more towards the end because I love the subject, it's not going to help us learn, and it certainly won't let us improve. And again, we'll possibly do drawing after drawing that's disappointing. And unfortunately, in that process, consolidating a lot of bad habits. This next point goes back again to the fact that learning to draw is a learning process. When there's learning taking place, then there needs to be a teacher. There will be a teacher. The question is, do we have a good teacher or not? And if I'm my own teacher, if I'm on a self-taught artist learning journey, then I have to do my best not just to be a good student, but to be a good teacher. And something a good teacher does is that they mark their students' work. I need to mark my work. I need to look at what I've done, and I need to critique it, because I need to assess, what have I learned? What have I achieved? Am I ready to move on to the next level? Do I need to redo what I've done? Because now that I've done it and I've looked at it critically, and I mean critically in a helpful way, can I see things that I didn't do right the first time? One of the most helpful ways we can improve our drawing is to redraw something we've drawn that we're not happy with, and to do it as close to the original drawing as possible. Because when we do that, our starting point still has in our mind the observation that we had at the first drawing, and it doesn't mean we don't need to observe just as carefully, but we're building on that observation that's still in our memory, and therefore we have a head start with the observation we do now. We go further with our observation more quickly, and that happens at every level of the drawing process. And now I can concentrate on the elements of my original drawing that I wasn't happy with in my second drawing. It's a great way to improve. When we critique, we give ourselves a focus for next time. If we have a focus, it actually helps us to choose a subject to draw that will be helpful for our skill development. This next one is we draw the same sort of thing, the same sort of way every time. And this is again where it comes back to I need to be a good teacher for myself. And if I'm not careful, I might watch a very narrow range of subjects in the YouTube videos that I choose and not get the range that I need to develop the range of skills that I will need to improve, to be able to progress from subject to subject, both more complex subjects, but also drawn in a more sophisticated drawing style as I master simpler subjects and simpler styles. But I'm not just talking about doing the same thing stylistically or content-wise. I'm also talking about changing the way we're doing our lesson, the structural way we're doing the drawing. So at times we'll do 10 or 15 minute drawings. At other times we will do 15, 20, 30, 60 minute drawings. We might change the size of our drawing as well as the time we draw it in. We may try and deliberately choose a different type of drawing style once we've progressed past the very basics of drawing. We may vary what we draw with. If I always sit down and spend 30 minutes doing laborious small drawings, I may never learn that my personal sweet spot is 45-minute wonderfully gestural drawings on a larger scale. And I've saved till last what I think is possibly one of the least helpful mindsets it's able to have, and one of the main reasons our drawing doesn't improve. We fall into the very big trap of when we sit down with a pen or a pencil to draw, we're thinking that we're producing an artwork instead of I'm doing exercises to learn to draw. And I can't think of any other skill development area where this happens. If we pick up the violin to learn to play it, we're not for a minute thinking we're doing anything but starting at learning the basics. Then maybe we'll be able to play a very basic tune that we can recognize. We're not for a minute thinking at the end of our time practicing that we're going to be playing in an orchestra. But somehow when we sit down to learn to draw, we somehow feel that at the end of it, we're going to have an artwork. And I think the fact that when we draw, we're left at the end of that session with a physical, a tangible evidence of what we've done, maybe that's what puts the pressure. Whereas when I learn to drive, when I learn to play a sport or an instrument or a language, when I stop, there is nothing to see. But when I stop drawing, there is something in my hand that I can show people, that I can look at myself. And maybe this is the reason why we feel this pressure to have an artwork at the end. But can I say, if when I sit down to draw, I'm feeling that I'm going to have an artwork, or I'm thinking I should have an artwork at the end, this is an enormous pressure, and it's a pressure that's going to hugely distort what I do and how I do it. It's going to make me very hesitant to try anything new. It's going to make me very hesitant to experiment. It's going to make me very afraid of making mistakes, because I don't want to put a mark on the paper that will spoil the artwork. But if it's not a commission from someone, then it's a learning experience, and it doesn't have to be an artwork. In fact, I'm better off getting quite clear in my mind, in my thinking, this is not going to be an artwork. This is a practice session. And a practice session is where we learn things, and we learn things by trying things, by looking at the results and working out what can I do next time that will improve. Please let me know which one of these has been the most important for your thinking or for your practice. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I hope you found these helpful. Every one of these points I think is really important. And certainly when we start to combine several of them together, it can build up a significant momentum in what we do and how we do it that becomes very unhelpful for our drawing improvement, and therefore on the longer term, very discouraging. And being discouraged is no fun. So look, keep at it, keep drawing. It's a wonderful journey to be on. Let's not put the pressure on thinking we need to have arrived at the end as we're starting. But look, whatever you draw, however you draw it, make sure you do have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.